So for this week's lab, we're going to actually make a motor spin. So we need to take a few minutes and figure out how we're going to make that happen. So we're going to redo what we've done in the last 2 weeks. We're going to do 2-wire control, 3-wire control, and so we're just going to rebuild the control circuits that you've already done. But we're going to add to that now finally the need to build a power circuit. Okay, so we will look at the circuit itself, but let's look at the lab station first. Every lab station has 3 motors. So step 1, a rather important one, pick out the right motor. Okay, these 2 over here, which you can see are quite a bit smaller than this great big one, they're AC motors. Okay, a single phase motor and a 3-phase motor, and you're going to be controlling those next term. Okay, but don't pick up one of the smaller motors. Okay, they are the wrong ones. I'm going to set them aside. The much larger one is the DC motor that we're actually going to be working with this term. Okay, I'm just going to plug it right on there. The reason it's so big, I will let Jay cover that in theory class. We're going to look at it a little bit too. But the first thing I want to point out to you is that we are going to plug these motors into our lab stations right here on the side. Okay? By doing that, what's happened is all of the windings inside the motor come to these points here on the plug. Okay? And then when we plug the motor in, that gives us access to those points right here on the front of the blue boxes. Okay? We have the overlays that show us how we connect them, and we can figure out how to make our connections. So each different motor has its own plug, okay, which can plug in to the side over here, okay, and the DC motor has an overlay which shows us how these plugs connect here. Or if it's a different motor, has the same plug, still plugs in around the side, but we have a different overlay that we could place here showing us different connections for the different motor. So we could use that instead. Notice that we have right here the series winding, the armature winding, and the shunt winding connected to these 3 terminals and these 3 terminals. So if you want the armature winding and the shunt winding connected in parallel, you can add some jumpers there, and there to connect those in parallel. Or if you want the armature winding connected in series with the series winding, you can connect them like that. In the case of a compound motor, you can leave the series connected series circuit in series and parallel in the shunt winding as well, and you have both. Okay, over here is where we're going to pick up our DC power. Okay, and this dial will allow us to adjust the voltage that we're going to provide to our DC motor. To get to the DC power for the DC motor, we pick it up here at terminals 12 and 13. So again, up top on the terminal blocks, we don't have to come down here. Okay, notice I'm measuring DC voltage. I can put my leads in there, and I can change my DC voltage with this dial right here. So I can turn this down, and we see a reduction in the voltage. I can turn it up, and we get more. Notice that 40 here does not equal 40 volts output. In fact, it's just about exactly double. Okay, 40 here is almost 80. This chart, this gauge, is not actual voltage output, but it's the percentage of the total voltage output. Okay, so if I turn it up to 100%, the voltage output is 198 volts. So essentially 200 volts. So for our lab, once we've determined what voltage we want for our motor, okay, we are not actually putting the dial at that number. Okay, that is a percentage of the total voltage output being provided. Notice 40 is 79, essentially 80. These terminals are terminal 12 and 13. 12 and 13 is right here. Okay, so this is where we get our DC power. Okay, we're going to have to run it across to our motor starter. Okay, so we're going to put that, the positive and negative DC voltage, we're going to put that in L1 and L3. The reason we skip L2, we will get to later. Okay, there's a very good reason for doing that, and we will get there, but let's leave that conversation for a little bit later. What that means is that when you energize the motor starter and close the contacts, the DC voltage that we've placed at L1 and L3 becomes available down here at T1 and T3. Okay, we close the contacts. Now that voltage can be found at the bottom of the motor starter, and using the trough again, we'll bring wires back up to this terminal block right here. Okay, so this terminal block shows 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28, which ties in right here. You can see the numbers on here, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Now, the other thing I want to point out with these blue boxes is they have the very same thing happening over here. Okay, we can put the overlay on this side. We have the same 8 terminals. They're labeled 1 through 8, and we have our terminal block right here, 1 through 8. If we chose to wire up our motor here, we simply plug our motor in over here on this side. There's a plug-in over here, same as there is over there. Make sure if you're wiring this side or this side that you plug the motor in to the right side of the blue box. Okay, but that's all we have to do to get the motor spinning. Okay, plug it in, bring some power, put the appropriate jumpers in, and we're done. Okay?